Previously on the Garland Gab.
We are continuing with part 2 of our dissection, in-depth discussion and myth-busting of The Wizard of Oz.
One of the points I make is how careful MGM was to use as much Frank Baum, or eventually get back to Frank Baum in those diverse scripts they made for this film. When in the Oz book, when the house lands in Munchkin country, Judy is met by the Good Witch of the North and 3 Munchkins. That's it. And then they tell her to go to the Emerald City. She walks down the Yellow Brick Road, and at night, where she starts going, well, where am I going to spend the night? She passes a very large Munchkin house, one of the richest Munchkins in the country. And the yard is full of singing and dancing Munchkins, rejoicing in the fact that the Wicked Witch is dead and they're free of bondage. And they invite her in because they recognize her as their national heroine. And there are 5 little fiddlers playing, and there's food and celebration. And MGM very wisely conflated this.
I always get goosebumps. I can't tell you how many thousands of times I've watched the film, but when she walks through the door and you see her look of wonder, when you see Dorothy's look of wonder on her face, it's mirroring the person that's watching her.
I'm obsessed with the ruby slippers just in general. I love them ever since I was a child and saw them on the screen, sparkling. I've wanted them and all of that. I'm like the Wicked Witch of the West myself. Talking of special effects and the effort and everything that MGM went to, of course, Munchkinland is our first introduction, our first encounter with the Wicked Witch of the West, played by Margaret Hamilton. And of course, in creating one of the special effects in this scene for Margaret was unfortunately in a very serious accident.
One of the things I love, if you are a Walt Disney cartoon aficionado at all, and you remember his character Goofy, the big dumb dog who had a voice, the guy who did Goofy's voice is one of the 4 voices that says "Follow the Yellow Brick Road" to Judy as she's stepping around the yellow circle. And you can really just listen to it, and because it's very apparent which one is the voice of Goofy, because it's just a sped up version of the kind of kind of voice.
Oh my God! I am going straight then into the next myth bust, and one of the biggest myth busts probably that needs to be done on this movie is following Judy and Ray's we're off to see the wizard, we meet the talking apple trees and we have the Tin Man scene, which we will discuss. But this is the section of the movie where the hanging Munchkin is alleged to occur as they are doing the trio version of We're Off to See the Wizard.
Nowadays, obviously with, your 4K, your Blu-ray, it's really obvious that it's a bit.
Again, the way the story has been distorted, it's like, oh, the director hit her. It's like he hauled off and socked her. And it's like, no, as Sarah just said, it was, she cracked up during take after take. Burt Law warranted it. He was wonderful. She loved to laugh. Fleming took her around behind the tree, and as the John Lee Mahan, who was his right hand on the set of The Wizard of Oz and on many pictures, because Johnny Mahan was a writer. And if they needed an extra line, if they needed an extra business, Johnny would, come up with some comedy bit or something. And Johnny Mahan said, he took her behind the tree and he said, darling, this is serious. And he gave her a smart little smack on the cheek. He didn't, get on his, what do they call them?
Brass knuckles.
Thank you. I knew we had a street fighter in that.
Talking of the deleted reprise of Over the Rainbow, I don't know how I feel about that as well. Like, it's gorgeous and it's heartbreaking, but again, as you say, I don't know what way it would fit in the overall movie.
I get why they cut it, because it was just so sad. At this point in the film, right, we already have the children scared to death of the witch, of the monkeys, of Judy's already incredible acting in being so distraught and missing Auntie Em and wanting to go home. That would have just probably sent everybody over the edge.
And we will be back for part 3.
It only seems like part 4.
Oh, yeah. We will finish out the movie. We will discuss post-production, the immediate reaction in 1939-1940, and the legacy of the movie. So we hope you'll join us then again.
Oh my God, it's one of those days. Are you ready?
Yeah, all set.
Welcome back, Garland Gabbers. Welcome to our part 3 of our Wizard of Oz podcast. It wasn't intended to go to 3 parts, but we have so much information that it is going to 3 parts. So lots more content for you, lots more myths busting, lots more information, hopefully some that you didn't know, and lots more enjoying the film. So we are really pleased to welcome back again from part 2, preeminent Oz and Judy Garland historian and Emmy and Grammy award-winning John Fricke. We are also delighted to welcome back Chelsea, who runs her own social media pages, Fans of Jutes. So anyone who tuned into part 2, we picked up in Munchkinland, because part 1 we delved into the history, the books, early films, stage shows, pre-production, and we discussed and delved into the black and white sepia section of Wizard of Oz, and we busted many myths through there. Shirley Temple, Munchkins, you know, you 3 dirty hams. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch them. Link in description, 2 links in description. Then we picked up in part 2 from Munchkinland, and we travelled with Dorothy and her friends all the way up to the witch's castle, and we busted more myths, you know, slapping Judy and everything, secret cigarette pocket. Yep. Hanging Munchkin, don't forget that one. Still don't know what I'm talking about? Go back and watch again. And watch our podcast, not anything that says 20 facts that will ruin your childhood. Don't watch those, okay? So we left it with Dorothy in great danger in the witch's castle, which is where we're picking up. But before we start, I just want to slightly just track back to something we missed out on the last one that I meant to mention and we didn't. I don't think we did. Is just after the poppy field scene, before they'd entered the Emerald City, before the witch had sent her flying monkeys to capture Dorothy, there was a scene with the golden cap.
Oh, curse it, curse it. Somebody always helps that girl. But shoes are no shoes. I'm still great enough to conquer her. And woe to those who try to stop.
Where you only see the golden cap, but it's not mentioned. This is taken from the book, but is in relation to a scene which precedes this with the Wicked Witch of the West and the Winged Monkeys. Does anybody want to take us through that? Because I need to stop talking because I can't talk.
Well, I'll be glad to, if that's all right. Just the concept of the golden cap dates back to the original Wizard of Oz book by Frank Baum in 1900. And whoever owned this magical golden cap is the one who controlled the powers of the winged monkeys. And it had been passed along to the Wicked Witch of the West in pre-Oz history, pre-Oz book history. And whoever had the cap could command the winged monkeys 3 times. The final command was for them to go and capture Dorothy and destroy her friends, or bring Dorothy and Toto and the lion to the castle. You have to read the book to get all of this. But the winged monkeys were not good guys because they were under the control of somebody bad. At any rate, in the process of editing The Wizard of Oz, before it was premiered, we talked last time about how many of the Wicked Witch's scenes were trimmed as much as they could be, because she was scaring so many people, so many kids, especially at the sneak previews. They wanted to eliminate that kind of terror. So anytime they could slice any bit of Margaret Hamilton's dialogue or a little scene here and there, they did. And when she puts the characters to sleep in the poppy field, she's poisoned the field, they fall asleep. The Scarecrow and Tin Man are calling for help. There was a cutaway scene back to the witch in her tower saying it worked perfectly, something like that. And she says to the winged monkey, Nico, who's her familiar, the one who's always there with her, she says to him, bring me the golden cap. I'll summon the winged monkeys to fetch me those ruby slippers. And they took that out, just eliminate more of her terror time. Now, later on, so you see the Scarecrow calling for help in the finished film, and it cuts to Belinda superimposed, bringing the snow, which saves them. And so the next time you do see the Wicked Witch of the West, she's saying, curse it, curse it. Somebody always helps that girl. But I'm still great enough to conquer her. And woe to those who try to stop me. Now, in that little scene that I've just quoted, the winged monkey is holding the golden cap and hands it to the Wicked Witch of the West. And she, in anger, throws it across the room. So the golden cap is still there very briefly, but unless you know to look for it, you don't. And if you have looked and seen it and wondered what it is, now you'll know.
I always thought it was her Sunday golf hat.
When I was little, I actually thought it was like a sorry, John. I actually thought it was like a like a little thing she wanted to put the ruby slippers into. I don't know, my head, when I was a child, my head just thought that's what she wants to keep the ruby slippers in.
So anything else on that before we pick up in the Witch's Castle?
I just wanted to say that, like, I believe Margaret Hamilton's full screen time is only about, is it 12 or 14 minutes, somewhere in there. When in the grand scheme of things, you think that's, you know, in a movie that's 100 minutes long, only 12 of those minutes are dedicated to one of the most prominent, most memorable characters of the whole film. That's really a testament to Margaret Hamilton's acting, that she was able to dominate the film for only 12 minutes. And imagine what it would have been like had they not cut a lot of her scenes. It's, you know, it's, anyway, just my observation.
I agree.
If you remember the TV show, the sitcom over here called Perfect Strangers with Bronson Pinchot and Mark-Lynn Baker. Bronson was Balky, the shepherd from Nepos who comes to Chicago, and Bronson is an old friend, and we've known each other a long time, and we've been emailing yesterday or the day before talking about the Wizard of Oz movie, which we've been doing together for decades. And I pointed out that there's absolutely nothing redeeming about the Wicked Witch of the West in the movie. They don't bother to give her one iota of kindness or look for sympathy. Miss Gulch is James out of the room? Yes. Miss Gulch is a bitch. The Wicked Witch of the West is a bitch. And they're not going to let anybody feel anything sorry for this dreadful creature. And that, you know, it's, I was going to say it's painted black and white. In this case, it's painted green and white. But that's, they had to have that kind of villain and that kind of threat. Because as Carly says, she's not on the screen that much, but they do keep talking about her when she's not on the screen. Dorothy says, the Scarecrow, the witch mad at me. And then when she turns up again, you know, in the poppy field, and then the wizard knows about the witch and bring me the broomstick, we'd have to kill her to get it. I mean, all of that is about as heavy duty as a fantasy can manage, even though in Grimm and Anderson and all the classic fairy tales, the evil people are destroyed in a much less genteel fashion than the Wicked Witch of the West is in this.
Right. And I think one of the first glimpses you get of the Wicked Witch after she confronts Dorothy in Munchkinland is when she's lurking behind one of the apple trees. And then she kind of, like, you know, disappears out of the frame. And you're always wondering, like, when is she going to turn up next? Yeah.
The threat is always there, whether she is or not.
We'll discuss this later, but I might get a lot of hate for this, but I don't think the Wicked Witch of the West is the real villain in The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, she does make you feel like she's on the screen a lot longer. And not just her performance, as John said, it's the script writing, the movie making.
I was going to say, I think you're always just so relieved when she disappears. It's like enough to bother you, and then she goes away and you go, huh, I can breathe again, especially if you're a little kid.
But where you don't get to breathe from the Wicked Witch of the West is a lot of the scenes in the Witch's Castle, which we delved into quite deeply in the last podcast. We discussed the deleted version of Over the Rainbow. We discussed her in the Witch's Ball. And this is one other thing that I missed out on the last podcast. One of my memories, if I can just share it. I've shared with a few of you that I've got a distorted version in my memory. I've got a good long-term memory, but my version of when I first saw Oz is quite distorted. And I even wrote about it in the Born Bugle, John, when you asked me to write my piece. Well, I first saw it when I was 3, obviously a long time ago. And my first memory, I don't remember the early parts, even though they became my favourite parts. I remember post Emerald City, which must have had some kind of effect on me. But in my version, I remember them running into different rooms in the Emerald City and the Wicked Witch's face coming up on screens and laughing at them. And I think what I've done is I've interwoven the Emerald City with the wizard's head and the Wicked Witch in the crystal ball laughing, with them getting cornered by the Winkies, in the witch's castle. And I think I formed an amalgamation of those 3 things. But sorry, just a little memory that I wanted to share.
Make sure
Moving on.
Into science, because there are going to be people who want to look into that when they can cut you open and probe.
Might be worth getting that analysed, mightn't it? So is there anything anyone else wants to add on to the section in the witch's castle which we discussed before we go into her friends coming to rescue her?
Just that it's the most heart-wrenching, gut-pulling scene of the whole entire film. And there's that one close-up of Dorothy.
You see that? That's how much longer you've got to be alive. And it isn't long, my pretty. It isn't long. I can't wait forever to get those shoes.
As I believe when the witch is telling her how long she's got to be alive, where she's like, her lip is quivering, she's got the tears coming down, and it's some of the most raw acting I've ever seen in my life. And I think that, that whole witch's castle scene is likely what really drew me to Dorothy in the first place. It just gives you a whole new level of sympathy for her that you feel is almost as if you're going through it yourself. And I know that we kind of touched on that in the last episode as well, but just wanted to highlight it again. Just wow.
And she's 16
Yeah.
and 17. It's like, yeah, that's crazy. She's still such a baby.
Well, last time we talked about the reprise of Over the Rainbow in the Witch's Castle, again, her being 16. And what I loved about it when we found that, it was like she finishes, she's still crying, and you hear the technician say, "Cut, take 3, how is that one?" It's kind of like, we've already asked her to do it 3 times, so we asked her to do the kid to do it
Right.
once.
Her heart is lying on the floor and she has to pick it up and put it back in again.
Dorothy's in great danger, but as we know, Toto's escaped, and Toto comes and finds her friends as they're fixing up the scarecrow, and they go to rescue her. And then we have the scene where they're climbing up the rocks, and we have 3 stand-ins to the 3 gentlemen, and we also have that where there's very clearly a box or whatever it was in, attached to Bert Law's tail.
I hope my strength holds out. I hope your tail holds out. Oh.
As the Tin Man's pulling on it, and then we have them find the Winky Guards singing their famous song, and then they get into the fight with the Winky Guards, and then they steal their costumes and enter the witch's castle. The part where they actually walk into the witch's castle and the music, starts to crescendo and the gate goes up, gives me like goosebumps. So any opinions on those scenes?
Kitty has an opinion.
So what are the guards actually singing?
Nonsense syllables.
Okay.
Actually, that's probably another myth bust, because I did read something before that said, it sounds like the Winkies are just going, "Oh, we, yo, yo," but they're actually saying in the myth, "Oh, we loathe the old one," meaning the witch. And it's like, no, they're not actually saying that.
Yeah, I've heard one that's very similar to that, but it's "For all we owe her." I've heard
Oh.
that. And they actually parodied that scene in Disney's Wreck-It Ralph. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but they go into this video game. It's called Sugar Rush, and everything is all sweets and treats and everything. And they go up to this big castle, and it's a bunch of Oreos that are walking, and it's going, Oreo.
All we are, we owe her. All we owe, we owe the old one, Oreo. And it is basically, as Connor just said, it is nonsense syllables. O-E-A, O-E-A, and spelled out in the green 50th anniversary Oz book in the text, because when I was researching that, I got to look at the conductor's score. And of course, their chant is accompanied by that March of the Winkiest music. So the lyric line, if you want to call it a lyric line, O-E-A, E-O-A, is right there spelled out in the conductor's score. And it's that, and then to go back a little to when the three of them are climbing the mountain. Yes, the Bertlar, reinforced tail is very apparent, but what I didn't notice until I'd seen the film probably 75 or 80 times, and maybe then I finally had to see it on a big screen, or when it was 2K or 4K or 12K or whatever. That there are a couple long shots intercut with the close shot of Jack Haley and holding Bert Lahr's tail, where it's obviously stand-ins and especially the Cowardly Lion double in a really ratty costume. I mean, you look at it and you think, wait a minute, that looks so shabby. And obviously they were saving time. They put them in. Maybe they did the test footage to see how it would work, and the test footage was better than what they got with the actual three co-stars. I don't know, but it's very surprising to see that in the middle of this, where it can be so noticed if you're looking for it. So that's something to spot check when anybody next watches the movie.
It was years before I noticed it. Yeah, I always noticed the tail. What actually is that reinforcing the tail, John?
There's something I think the tail itself was probably just sewn onto the posterior of his costume, and it was sewn on tightly because they had to manipulate it with the fishing pole from above the set and the fishing line so that the tail would wag back and forth when they wanted it to. But I think if Jack Haley was actually going to be pulling on it to make it look real, they probably then had to attach the tail to something underneath the costume as well. And it was probably to some, reinforced piece of metal would have been clamped down on a piece of wood, or a really, really stiff piece of buckram, the kind of material that the Tin Man's costume was made of. It's anybody's guess, but it's very noticed all of a sudden that he has this kind of, pardon my language again, square ass.
That's what I was thinking.
Before. Either that or he's gotten really buff climbing that mountain. Take it however you want to take it.
Anything else on the lead up to the three friends entering the witch's castle before we go on to the actual rescue and escape?
Well, one thing, this gets us further in. You were talking about the men, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion going into the castle, and when they rush up the stairs to rescue Dorothy, and when they're rushing down, I mean, it's one of the handful of instances where MGM's orchestrators very cleverly used classical music quotes. Night on Bald Mountain is there. There's, I think, oh God, I'm Schumann and Schubert, or there are several places like that, and an old pop song, In the Shade of the Old Apple Tree. They use a few bars of that when the apples are throwing the apples at Dorothy and the Scarecrow. It's all part of that great rich knowledge and talent that the MGM employees had in every department, that they would find ways of putting that in. Not only was the music perfectly scary when it needed to be, but it was something that would resonate for people who would say, oh, I know what that music is. That is perfect. The movie, like the best movies, Oz operates on so many different levels all the time.
I'm glad you brought that up, John, because, even in later films, decades later, you hear something, or you'll hear something in a commercial and you're like, where have I heard that before? And it didn't really occur to me that the scoring for Oz was taking pieces from existing pieces as well. So that's really interesting to me.
I should know that by heart, but when we did I don't know if everybody has it, but if you don't have it, you can track down the 2 CD Rhino set that has all the Oz underscoring and some of the rehearsals and some of the outtakes. The booklet in there, they let me, I said, how long do you want the booklet to be? And they said, oh, just write something. Well, you guys know me. The booklet had to be like 54 pages to get it put in. But one of the things I was happy to do was write about the classical music stuff, because I had the conductor's score in front of me, and I had the legal papers about Oz from the MGM files that talked about, okay, this is how much they paid to use Night on Bald Mountain at that point. And it's a quite fascinating. Oh, and we talked about, you know, the Miss Gulch Wicked Witch music da 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 is a kind of a reworking of We're Off to See the Wizard da 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 da, just kind of bending it. I don't think anybody could recognize that unless it was pointed out to them. But one of the people who, I think it was someone trying to interview with one of the guys who had orchestrated Oz, and he had pointed that out. So it's quite, every moment they do everything they can visually, orally, dramatically, to make each scene as impressive or as important or as impactful as it can be.
Okay, so anyway, so yeah, the gentlemen, they enter the witch's castle and they manage to get Dorothy out of the tower where she is. The witch catches them. They get cornered a few times, and then that leads to the dramatic tension where the witch finally corners them, and then Judy throws water over the wicked witch, and she melts. So discussions on those few scenes.
I've got a few things to say about it if I could. The scene where Dorothy melts the Wicked Witch was the scene that I wore out my VHS on. That was the scene that I would constantly ask my parents to rewind, to the point that it would drive my dad absolutely crazy. And after that, he couldn't watch The Wizard of Oz anymore. I kind of ruined it for him. But I absolutely love the face that Judy makes as she is like throwing the water, and it's one of those, if you blink, you'll miss it. It's pretty cute. I also love I love the sequence where the Scarecrow is figuring out that if he uses the Tin Man's axe to chop the rope, it will then bring down the chandelier. I love that. It sounds weird, but I love the cinematography of it. You can see his thought process as the camera sort of panning down, the music in the background. And then of course we get that ear-piercing scream from the Wicked Witch as she throws the
hourglass.
Thank you. Rain frog. It's all just the whole thing is just such an intense, once it gets to that witch's castle, it is boom, boom, boom. You do not get a break.
That's right. Don't hurt them right away. We'll let them think about it a little first.
And you can't look away either.
No. I will say that, again, credit to acting, Ray Bolger's acting, because that could have been a bad actor could have made that seem really obvious, really contrived, but no.
It's just horrific. Like when it does come down and then she descends the stairs and the broomstick is going and she sees them. It's actually horrific,
And the way when the Wicked Witch actually catches them and corners them, how she's threatening to make sure everyone else goes before Dorothy so that she has to watch them all die. my God. No wonder we're traumatized.
Well, I know, because by this point you've had like an hour and 20 minutes of becoming invested in Dorothy Gale, and 45 minutes of being invested, or an hour of being invested in the wonderful Scarecrow, the wonderful Tin Man, and the wonderful Lion. And it's like, you don't want anything to happen to them ever. They are your 4 best friends, plus Toto. And one of the things that I like about the script, again, versus the movie, in the movie, the Wicked Witch is trying to get the silver shoes, magic shoes from Dorothy, and she makes an invisible bar across the bottom of a door frame, so that when Dorothy is walking, she trips and loses one of the shoes, and the witch grabs it and says, "Now I've got it, and I'll get the other one too." And Dorothy, in anger, picks up a bucket of water and throws it at the witch, and the witch melts. In the MGM movie, they gave Dorothy much more justification. It wasn't just a hissy fit or anger. She was trying to save her friend, and in the process kill the Wicked Witch. I always thought that was very, again, they're going for a black and white sort of, all good, all evil, but it works very, very well. I always thought that was good scripting.
Also, the face on both Judy and Ray Bolger when she puts the, the fire on his arm.
How about a little fire, Scarecrow?
It absolutely kills me. Again, acting, just with facial expressions.
John, was it ever a topic of discussion to incorporate the tripping scene, or they didn't really even consider it?
I've never seen it in any of the early script drafts. I don't have all of them, but I must have about a dozen different writers and a dozen different scripts dating back to like March of 38. And of course they didn't get a finished one till October. And even that was rewritten a lot across the course of the filming. But no, it was never that. I'd have to go back and see, there are so many permutations in those scripts of things. I did a whole 75-minute talk at the Ozfest in Kansas last year about things you didn't see in the MGM movie, and boy, are we glad, was the title of the presentation. But it was all about the prince and princess who sing operetta numbers, and the witch's son, and Miss Gulch's son, and Miss Gulch's niece, and Lizzie Smithers, the waitress in Kansas who turns up in Oz too, and the woodpecker who destroys the wizard's balloon as they're flying away, and Dorothy and the wizard have to be rescued underneath the falling balloon by the Munchkin Fire Department. I mean, this was all in versions of the Wizard of Oz script. And I'd have to really go back and look and see, but no, I don't remember the tripping business ever being in any of the early scripts.
Do we want to discuss how the witch melted?
It's probably a John answer or somebody. I don't know.
Well, no, because I've heard about it from Margaret Hamilton and read it from Buddy Gillespie, the guy who did the special effects, but he said that was one of the easiest of all. He said, we threw the water, it's a lot of little edits quickly. And then we put her on an elevator in the floor of the soundstage, a little trap door. And we anchored the hem of her gown out around the perimeter of the elevator. We put dry ice under it. And just before we started shooting, Victor Fleming took a hose and wet the hem of her gowns, which would cause the dry ice to steam. They gave her a bigger Wicked Witch's hat so that it would make her face and her head look smaller. And they just gradually lowered her down through all of this rising steam and the elevator. And then the wind that came up through the cavity in the floor puffed out her dress. And that was it. It was that simple.
So simple, but so effective. Okay, so after the witch has melted, the head of the Winkies, who is called, what's his name? Doesn't he have a name? The main Winky guy.
The name is the wing monkey, Miko.
Does he not have a name as well? The
No,
Winky guard? Or is he just anyway, the Winky guard?
his real name is Mitchell Lewis. And
Mitchell
Garland,
Lewis.
if you want to see what he looks like when he's not green, he's also the bartender in the Harvey Girls who says, "Lady, your meat's in there."
Wow.
She's dead. You killed her.
I didn't mean to kill her.
Lady, your meat's in there.
It's amazing.
Why did we not know these things?
I found that out, I guess, about 8-9 years ago, and I've mentioned it several places or written about it several places. But, you know, they're not all of this John Fricke palaver is assembled in one place, so I'm not sure where it was. But yeah, he's the bartender.
Oh my God.
Now that I'm just like replaying that line, the voice sounds the same, so that makes sense.
Yeah, so he makes a remark that she's dead and they've killed her, and obviously Dorothy at first thinks there's going to be repercussions, but there isn't because they're all really, really pleased. She asks for the broom, and they give her the broom, and then they take it back to the Emerald City. Then we have the scenes in the Emerald City where they present the broom to the wizard's head, and we get the reveal of the real wizard, where we see little Toto where he's hooked onto the curtain, and then we see Judy pull it off as she picks him up. So cute. All being given their desired traits, you know, the heart, the courage, the brain, but in different formats, including the Scarecrow's inaccurate version of Pythagoras' theorem, and I'm no mathematician whatsoever. Then we have the scene with the balloon, and the balloon flying away, and then Dorothy saying goodbye to her friends. There's no place like home, legendary, and then return to Kansas. So that's it all in a chunk, so we'll break it down bit by bit. It does jump from the witch's castle to the wizard's room, but there was a deleted number in the middle of this, a reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. Who wants to take us through that?
Well, the Winkies started it by singing "Hail, Hail, the Witch is Dead," which I sort of transitioned into the Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead reprise. And we do have a little glimpse of it in one of the trailers to sort of get a little flavour as to what it was like. Because you're right, in the movie it just dissolves and they're straight back, but there was another procession of the last Wicked Witch of Oz in Oz, her demise.
I think if you watch the film very closely, where now we can go back to the wizard and tell him the Wicked Witch is dead, and the Winkies chant, "The Wicked Witch is dead," and it dissolves to the head of the Great Oz saying, "Can I believe my eyes? Why have you come back?" If you watch the dissolve very carefully, or have the ability to freeze frame or slow it down, we go back to the wizard and tell him the Wicked Witch is dead. The Wicked Witch is dead. You can watch in the dissolve that the winky mouths are still moving, which is the "Hail, Hail, the Witch is Dead" moment. And they had about 8 bars of the song, and then it carried through. And we assembled this from the tracks that were left at Metro for the Rhino CD set, where it was the most elaborate number in the Emerald City in terms of actual production value, in that there were 300 extras, in green, waiting to welcome Dorothy and her friends back, the Scarecrow carrying the broomstick of the witch. And it's a great musical number. It's only 60 seconds long from Winkies to end, but the Emerald Citizens escort the Dorothy and company back to the entrance to the throne room. And that was all there was to it. And as I think we pointed out last time, the last time anybody has sung in this film is the lion singing "If I Were King of the Forest" 45 minutes before. The jitterbug is gone. The tearful reprise of Over the Rainbow in the Witch's Castle is gone, and this reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch's Dead is gone. So it suddenly Oz has gone from being a musical to an action picture, and that's fine because it propels itself along. But if I could see any 1 minute of deleted material from The Wizard of Oz, it would be the reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch's Dead. Just because, I mean, I would love to see Judy's Tearful Over the Rainbow. I would love to see, for fun, the Jitterbug, but I would love to put back the reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch's Dead, just for that moment of music and that moment, you know, because they've melted the witch. They've realized it's okay in that 20 seconds with the Winky guards, that there's not going to be repercussions, as Sarah said, I think, or Carly said. But again, then they're boom, and the great head is threatening them, and, you know, go away and come back tomorrow. And it's like, wait a minute, don't they get to celebrate at all? You know what? It's time for cake and ice cream. It's time for some lighthearted moment. And one more minute wouldn't have killed the movie, in my opinion. But pace was important, and that's why it went. But it was quite lavish. We have that little bit in the trailer. Unfortunately, the only trailers left for Oz are the ones for 1949 and 1955, because the original 1939 trailer of The Wizard of Oz had a different angle and more seconds of the triumphal return reprise in it. So it'd be nice to find a 1939 trailer somewhere someday to see, you know, even that bit more of the musical number.
Going back to the reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch's Dead, I just want to echo what John said. I don't know why it was cut. Again, as you said, probably pacing, because it's all been, you know, dramatic, and it, you know, would have broke it up a bit. But I would have liked that little bit of relief from what we've just, you know, gone through in the Witch's Castle. But it also would have brought it full circle perfectly with the reprise. You know, we had that when she lands in Munchkin Land, and now we have it not long before she, you know, leaves the lands of Oz. You know, the plant and payoff would have been perfect. So
it's like you only get sung to if the first time you kill a witch. The second time you kill a witch, you're out of luck, Dorothy. There's not going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so should we move on then to the scene in the witch's throne room? I mean, shall we carry on to the scene in the wizard's throne room?
Yeah.
We have got, as we've just said, they present the burnt down broom. And I was so stupid as a kid, wondering why it was so much shorter.
I was too.
Why was I so stupid like that? The broom looks different. Yeah, it's just been on fire. And then we get the big reveal.
They cut it off. You know, you know, a lot of what made it long were all those long straws at the end, and then it burned, of course, and then it was trimmed off kind of neatly before that when they got back to the Emerald City. I guess they figured with the wizard, neatness counts or something, so we better make the room look nice.
The wizard's got OCD. Dorothy's like, you know, she's fighting back with the wizards, isn't she? You know, I want to go home now. Gives me
powerful, you'd keep your promises.
Yeah. The I want to go home now does, as well as other parts, does foreshadow the pirate for me.
Auntie Nurse, wake up! I want to go home. I want to go home this minute. It's still dark. I don't care. I want to go home. Oh, well, we might as well.
Yes.
Good point.
And then Toto goes and reveals, you know, the real wizard, who is a fake.
Well, that was a moment that took me forever to realize that, you know, and I had to kind of see it on a big screen to realize that the bottom of the curtain is attached to Toto's collar. He does very well at, you know, walking over to his trainer off camera, but he wasn't, you know, going to take the curtain in his teeth and yank it with him. In the book, the wizard is behind a screen, and the lion roars at the wizard in anger, I guess, if I'm remembering correctly, because the wizard is telling them, you know, I'm not going to give you what I promised you right now. And the lion roars in anger, and Toto, I think it's Toto, jumps and knocks the screen over, and that's how the wizard is revealed. But it's the same basic idea, the same premise, that it's It's Toto. Talk.
I was going to say, there's another, I've completely blanked here. Isn't there another continuity error in this scene?
Yes, there is. When they move over to confront Frank Morgan at his console, there was a little bit where the wizard tries to distract him with kind of Professor Marvel tricks and pulls out flowers of the world or something, a book, manufactures out of his sleeve or something, a bouquet of flowers. And they cut that out for, again, keep the pace up. But then, you see them go over and talk to him at the council, and then there's a cut. And when you see the console again in the background, the bouquet of flowers sitting there on the console, it's very apparent.
So any thoughts, opinions, commentary on this scene with the big reveal and everyone getting what they've been desiring all their lives?
Dorothy has balls. Like, she stands up to every single oh God, I can't. She stands up to Miss Gulch in the beginning. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. She stands up to Miss Gulch in the beginning.
Again. Oh, no, I won't let you take him. You go away. Oh, I'll bite you myself.
Dorothy. She yells at the wizard.
Oh, but I want to go home now.
I want to go home now. Like, I love that. Talk about, again, bringing it back to part one. Women, women carrying the torch. She was a powerful.
It's very Judy too, I must say.
Yeah.
Or anybody, it's that underscoring of everybody should stand up for themselves and everybody should be brave and everybody has to put their foot down at one point or another and say enough of this. Yeah. No, it's very, the character of Dorothy is very empowering. The other thing, before we leave the presentation scene, if we're in any danger of doing that, I want to point out that the Pythagorean, I just have mathematical formula down here. Let's stick with that. I think that was a scene that was written by Noel Langley, who could be kind of a cynic. And I'm betting on the fact that he wrote it inaccurately, and the Scarecrow thinks he's got a brain and exclaims about it, and everybody thinks he has a brain, because all you have to do is say something definitively, and people will think you know what you're talking about.
The sum of the square roots of any two sides of an isosceles triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side. Oh, joy, rapture! I've got a brain!
I refer you to all the stupid myths and legends about the Wizard of Oz on the internet. And they've heard it, they put it forward, they embellish it, they trash it up, and other people believe it because it's being stated, with no qualification or indecision whatsoever. On the other hand, you have that idiot John Fricke talking and making all these declarative statements. And it's like, well, why should we listen to him? But people have, and I'm grateful because I really do try to put it forward as honestly as I can and as truthfully. But none of us were there, unfortunately. There's a time machine, John. I went 6 months in Culver City from October to March 1938-39, and I'm going to take
Don't we all?
Picking back up in the throne room when Dorothy's three friends have just been given their qualities, I shall call them, their desires, their heart's desires. And then it's pointed out, hey, what about Dorothy? And again, Judy's heartbreaking acting, where her little, I don't think there's anything in that black bag for me.
Oh, I don't think there's anything in that black bag for me.
Sniffle, sniffle.
She just looks so tired in that sequence, and it's obviously they filmed them on different days, but everything that's just transpired over the last however long she was captivated for and everything, it's all written on her face. She just looks exhausted, and she looks like she's been crying for a long time. She looks like she's traumatized and just desperately wants to go home. And again, I could just sit here and say the whole thing about Judy's acting, but it's brought back to that. Like, it's just incredible.
And Chelsea's right. It's so amazing that she's 16 doing this, and it's so natural. Like, it's not forced. It's not anything. It's just, you believe it.
And it didn't matter, like, whether they wanted her to be 12 or not. like she embodied the role so well that you didn't have to suspend your disbelief for a second, because you could feel what she was feeling every second.
I never noticed, like as a child watching it, that she was like a teenager playing younger. She's kind of just ageless or something in it.
Right. Ageless
She
is a
just
good
was.
word. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was just Dorothy. I didn't even really need to know what age she was as a child.
Right.
Just being. It's the same with the voice as well, you know, and people say, you know, like her voice is so much older than she looked like an over the rainbow. It didn't matter
Right.
because it still matched her.
Again, could you imagine anybody else singing it? I mean, I can't.
Okay, so we're back into the I think it's the center of the Emerald City or the beginning of the Emerald City. I don't know.
Yeah.
The witch, sorry.
It's like the plaza of the Emerald City.
Plaza, yeah. And the wizard said that he's going to fly Dorothy back to Kansas in a hot air balloon because he's an old Kansas man himself. And so she's all prepared in the balloon, ready to go. You do, Carly found this for us the other week. You do see a quick moment where the Scarecrow kisses a hand, which we'd never noticed.
Unexplainable journey into the outer stratosphere.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I think there was early draft where Hunk and Dorothy were having a little romance, I think. But then Toto sees the cat with the Siamese cat with the gorgeous blue eyes. Sorry, Toto, I'm a cat person. And chases after him. And the balloon, you know, flies away. You actually see the Tin Man, you know, unraveling it and sending it off. Yeah. I've always wondered, was that meant to be? Was that just part of the production of how they could get it off, or was the Tin Man trying to get rid of him?
Well, that's one of those moments that the naysayers always say, oh, well, look, he's even letting it go. I mean, whoa. My thought is the Tin Man's looking away so distracted at that point that he thinks he's tightening it and he doesn't even realize. I will rationalize the Oz characters out of any negativity I can. And I always put on it that he thought he was, because he wasn't paying attention. He was just making the motion.
Shut that door! This is a highly irregular procedure. Absolutely unprecedented.
That's a good way of looking at it.
I don't know if it's a good way, but it is the intrinsically John Fricke way of looking at it.
Well, I'm going to rationalise Carly's theory in a moment about Glinda. Okay, so, because I'm presuming this is the point you're going to put it in.
Heck yeah.
This is what a podcast is for, debates and discussion. So the balloon goes and Dorothy's left and she does have Toto back. But then Glinda's bubble appears and the Scarecrow says, here's someone who might be able to help you. And then we get that heartfelt, oh, will you help me? Can you help me? Sorry, I'm not an actress.
Oh, will you help me? Can you help me? You don't need to be helped any longer. You've always had the power to go back to Kansas. I have.
You know, after all, it's the desperation. She's desperate at this point, isn't she, Dorothy? And this is when Glinda says, you've always had the power. And then she explains to her, which I will let Carly go through. And then we have the heartfelt goodbyes, which I still can't get through today without filling up when she says goodbye.
Yeah.
And the very, very famous, there's no place like home, and the slippers clicking 3 times. So go on, discuss and dissect.
Okay. I don't know how Dorothy didn't just, like, she's already let it out at Miss Gulch. She's let it out at the wizard. Why didn't she say, like, let it out at Glinda? You mean to tell me I could have gone home this whole time? So my theory, I don't think the Wicked Witch of the West is truly the villain of this whole plot. I think it's Glinda. And here's why. Because so Glinda basically sends Dorothy on a wild goose chase, knowing full well, clearly, that the wizard is not exactly an all-powerful person who can just, you know, wave a wand and send her home. She, I think, knows that the wizard is going to make her kill the Wicked Witch of the West in order to, you know, restore peace in the land of Oz. And I think she knew the whole time that Dorothy would do it. and Dorothy would do it for her, and she was kind of, oh man, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this. She was kind of using Dorothy this whole time.
Like as a hit woman.
Yes.
But that's my point. That's why Glinda's good for me. And obviously we've had Wicked since, you know, where it is a bit of a reversal in Wicked, who is really the good and evil. I don't know whether she definitely did know this was going to happen. Again, in the book, we have the two different good witches of the north, good witch of the south. So it's a different one who sends her home to the one who sets her on a journey. But Glinda had to, well, we wouldn't have had a film if she hadn't have like sent her on a journey. But she had to send Dorothy to do good because she knew this, because she knew Dorothy was the like savior of Oz, and if she hadn't, she wouldn't have met the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, or killed the witch. They wouldn't have found what was already within them. And Dorothy at this point didn't know it was in her to go home, and as she said, she couldn't have just told her, like they said to her, why didn't you tell her in the first place? She had to find it within herself, same as all the characters. And obviously she found it within herself. She destroyed the witch and, you know, returned Oz back to peace for however briefly it was, if you want to continue on to the books. But that's my little antidote to that theory.
But she nearly got killed.
Well, she knew she wouldn't go, she knew she had the power to not get killed.
I guess.
Kieran, that's actually so interesting because I never thought of it that. It's actually only after clicking with me now what you're saying, because the other guys had it all along, and that's the whole fucking point with Dorothy, that she had the power all along.
But they wouldn't have found it without the journey.
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't have found it without Dorothy.
Plus, as I said, we wouldn't have had a film or a book. So.
Exactly. You can't over rationalize things like that.
No.
Because, yeah, there would be no plot. I'm just me being the opposition.
No, but it is funny as well when Glinda's like, you know, with the slippers, she's like, keep tight inside of them. Their magic must be powerful. And all of a sudden she knows that they do work at the end.
Yeah.
Well, the contrast in the books is that the Good Witch of the North, who gives the shoes to Dorothy in Frank Baum's text, she's one of the Munchkins, one of the three Munchkins who greets Judy, says, the Witch of the East was proud of those silver shoes, and there is some charm connected with them, but we never knew what it was. I'm just looking to see if the Good Witch of the North gives her the shoes. Her silver shoes are yours, and you shall have them to wear. And Dorothy carried the shoes into the house and placed them on the table. And then she came out again to the Munchkins and said, I'm anxious to get back to my aunt and uncle. Can you help me find my way? And none of them could. Not the witch, you know, Oz was not the internet highway. And when it gets to the end, Galinda is the one whom she hasn't met until chapter 23. Galinda's the one who knows, says, your silver shoes will carry you over the desert. If you had known their power, you could have gone back to your Aunt Em the very first day you came to this country. But then I should not have had my wonderful brains. I might have passed my whole life in the farmer's cornfield. And I should not have had a lovely heart. I might have stood rusted in the forest till the end of the world. And I should have lived a coward forever. And no beast in all the forest would have had a good word to say to me. This is all true, said Dorothy. And I'm glad I was able to be of use to these good friends. But now that each of them has had what they most desired, and each is happy in having a kingdom to rule besides, I think I should like to go back to Kansas. So I think, again, MGM made a mistake in having Glinda come into the Emerald City and saying, Dorothy, I have now found out about the magic of those shoes. Because again, in the movie, Glinda says at the beginning, their magic must be very powerful or she wouldn't want them so badly. And I guess, you know, it needs that one line of explanation, or as Carly said, it's, you know, Glinda comes off as, you know, hateful. And it's, you can certainly ascribe to her a subtext of knowing that Dorothy is supposed to free the whole world from wicked witches and go through all of this stuff and help the others. And in a greater Oz universe with the Oz fiction writers of today reconfiguring what Baum wrote, there is some of that coming into the new texts. But if you go from the original, basically MGM is just missing that one line of exposition that would say, explain why Glinda. I guess maybe they thought it was implied. Again, it's not terribly clear, but again, they were making a movie to see once on a hot afternoon in August 1939. They weren't making a movie that people would spend 6 hours discussing and still not be through. Or 8 hours discussing, or 12 hours discussing and still not be through 80 some years later.
And she was also wanting to run away from home, so maybe that was like let that be a lesson to you, that if you decide to run away from home, you can get into all kinds of trouble that you may not want, but you have to find that out for yourself.
Yes, exactly, because the running away from home is unique to the MGM movie too, and that is all part of Dorothy's saga. That she thinks things are so bad at home, she has to get away from these people who won't help her. And yet when danger threatens her Aunt Em, the first thing she wants to do and does is run home again. So again, it can be analyzed, it can be overanalyzed, if you will. It can be shot down, it can be puffed up, it can be explained away, it can be added to, it can be subtracted from. But basically, there's some things you just have to kind of take at face value. And Dorothy socking Billy Burke in the eye wouldn't have exactly been the ending anybody was expecting.
All I'm saying is the Wicked Witch just wanted her sister's shoes back, and rightfully so.
Since we're going into the saying goodbye stuff next, I assume, and we can always backtrack if I'm jumping too quickly. But the underscoring there, this was one of the great joys of putting together the CDs that included the underscoring, because finding out that Over the Rainbow works counterpoint to the melody line of There's No Place Like Home when Judy is saying goodbye to the men is beautiful. And it's so gorgeously done. Now, I just think that is very telling. And again, her goodbyes are, and those ham bone actors are not being ham bone at all there. And it is just a killer moment. Because, it's the actors saying goodbye to another actor, but it's also those characters saying goodbye to somebody who has, for the preceding hour of the film, 70 minutes of the film, meant the world to them as she has helped them and they have helped her.
Oh, it's gonna be so hard to say goodbye. I love you all too. Goodbye, Tin Man. Oh, don't cry. You rust so dreadfully. Here's your oil can. Goodbye.
Now I know I've got a heart, because it's breaking.
Goodbye, Lion. I know it isn't right, but I'm gonna miss the way you used to holler for help before you found your courage.
I would never have found it if it hadn't been for you.
I think I'll miss you most of all.
One thing that's so profound about their goodbyes is the goodbye between the Scarecrow and Dorothy. The Scarecrow doesn't say a single word, and I think that speaks more than any words could have spoken. And then of course we have that, I think I'll miss you most of all. Is it true that is left in there because of the previous draft with them having a bit of a romance?
Yes, with Dorothy having Dorothy and the farmhand Hunk having a crush on each other when Hunk, the Scarecrow, was going to be played by Buddy Ebsen. Because everybody at MGM, everybody thought that the idea of Buddy Ebsen and Judy Garland was very charming and funny, this tall man and this diminutive girl. And that's why they were going to be cast in Born to Dance together, why they were cast in the dance number in Broadway Melody together, and probably one of the reasons they were cast together in Wizard of Oz. And and I think the line, I guess I'll miss you most, was Hunk's line to Judy on the train as he goes off to agricultural school. That was the end scene, was not the bedroom scene was there, But the end was Hunk going off to agricultural college to make something of himself, and Judy promising to write. And they're both kind of shamefaced because they've just seen Miss Gulch's niece run away with her boyfriend Kenny, who was going to be the prince in Oz, and the niece was going to be the princess of Oz, and the boyfriend was going to be turned into the Cowardly Lion in Oz. And Miss Gulch has come riding in on her tandem bicycle with her dumb son Bulbo with her. No, Walter. Bulbo was the witch's son's name in Oz. And they were going to narrowly miss colliding with Professor Marvel's wagon in the streets of the town, and have to swerve off, and they were going to fall in a big horse trough of water. The witch in water. You know, I mean, all of this was part of it. And, you know, Judy on the trains, you know, the train was about to leave and she's going to get off, and Hunk says to her, I think I'll miss you most. And in terms of the movie, I think I'll miss you most of all. The only way you can really put it together is that, you know, she met the Scarecrow first. That's the rationalization. They known each other the longest. And he was always there for her, always coming up with the ideas, always, you know, he's come to take us to Dorothy, all that kind of stuff. It's there in little increments. And again, a smarter writer would have possibly eliminated it or revised it to something else. But, you know, just like you were my first friend, thank you, something like that. But we can't go back and change history any more than we can relive it, unfortunately.
I'm actually glad that they left it in, and that they left it in the way that it was, because it does speak volumes with the type of connection that they had. And I always interpreted it as he was with her the longest, and it made sense that they had that. Now I am glad that they removed the romance aspect between them, but I think that them leaving that line and that goodbye between Dorothy and the Scarecrow was just one of the most profound moments of the film.
Well, again, what the Tin Man says and what the Lions say are absolutely go for the jugular, and as profound as they could be. The fact then, as you said, that the Scarecrow doesn't say anything at all was about the only way they could top the preceding two and give the line to Dorothy besides. So I think there's an awful lot of craft going on here. And is it 100% pure craft? No, nothing is 100% pure. But is it 100% effective? Amen.
Okay, after her goodbyes, she says a little goodbye, even shaking Toto's paw. Just so cute. Say goodbye, Toto. And then we have the very, very famous scene, the clicking of the heels, and there's no place like home. Anyone want to comment on that before she gets home?
I have a comment and a question. My question is, do we know, is that Judy tapping her heels, or is it one of the others, like her stand-in or her double?
We don't know.
We don't know.
I would be very much surprised had it been Judy's feet. That's, you know, you get a foot double in the way you get hand doubles in for things like that. Judy, whom they could only have on set 4 hours a day. Judy, it's like, I would love to, it's enough that spiritually it's Judy. And you believe enough in the movie that, you know, those are Dorothy's feet. Yeah. And Judy Garland is Dorothy, so ergo, that's Judy Garland's feet.
And think to yourself, there's no place like home. There's no place like home.
There's no place like home.
You know what's funny is that in the scene where we know that it's her stand-in at the beginning walking along the pig pen, I can actually tell that it's not Judy, because those are not her legs. And I always thought that the silver shoes, wow, the ruby slippers on her, I always thought that was her legs.
Okay, anything else about her goodbyes before we move on to the climber?
Again, you can hear on the Rhino CD, they originally assembled a whole long montage, a minute-long montage of clips to accompany Dorothy's trip home. And then they cut it down to just, I think, the three things you see: the slippers clicking, the house falling out of the sky, and that's it. She's back in Kansas. But there was a whole long, you know, seeing the Munchkins, the witch, the good witch, all this stuff in her delirium going home was part of the rough cut. And again, they cut it down.
So then, as John stuff says, we see the montage, and then Dorothy finds herself awaking from a dream.
Place like home. There's no place like home. There's no,
Wake up, honey.
there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no
Dorothy. Dorothy, dear. It's Aunt Em, darling.
Oh, Auntie Em, it's you.
Yes, darling.
Hello there. Anybody home? I just dropped by because I heard the little girl got caught in the big... Well, she seems all right now.
Yeah, she got quite a bump on the head. We kind of thought there for a minute she was going to leave us.
Oh.
But I did leave you, Uncle Henry. That's just the trouble. And I tried to get back for days and days.
There, lie quiet now. You just had a bad dream.
Sure.
Which is a big departure from the book. It's caused some people, well, when I did script writing on my university course, we were always taught that there was two tropes you never do nowadays. One was start a script with someone waking up late for something, but then we have Back to the Future where he wakes up late for school, and that's a classic. And you don't end it with "it was all a dream." We have The Wizard of Oz where it was all a dream, and that's a classic. Obviously, those are older films. You don't really do it now because it can't be, it's a little bit contrived. But then we have Dorothy realising that being told it was all a dream, and she's, pointing that her friends were actually there. Thoughts, opinions?
Well, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit how long I went without actually making the connection that, the characters in Oz were the same guys that Dorothy was interacting with in Kansas. It took me a while to be like, oh, so that's who everybody is.
I had a girl tap me on the shoulder in sociology class when we were juniors in high school. So we were 17 years old. And it was the Monday morning after the annual Oz telecast. And she tapped me and she said, I never knew before that the farmhands were this scared. So,
I do actually have a theory, but it's another one of these silly theories that you can put right if you want, that it wasn't actually a dream. And we know why MGM made it a dream. They were worried about the fantasy on the 1939 audience. But again, any time traveling films, often the time stops. In the real world, I think when she hit her head, time stopped in Kansas, but she did actually travel to Oz, and then she came back. It had been however long in Oz. To how but time hadn't moved in Kansas till she in the time that she was found and put to bed and everything. That's just one of those out there little theories.
Kind of think so too. I think it cast doubt on whether it is a dream or not.
I kind of suspected sort of all along that it was a dream because of the way that she got into Oz. She was hit on the back of the head, she fell down to the bed and she fell asleep. Or at least it's kind of insinuated that she fell asleep, and all of a sudden she's hallucinating, she's seeing cows flying out her window. I kind of had a suspicion that it was always a dream or some kind of she's been knocked unconscious. So
I think, again, the book, of course, is a pure fantasy. And when she comes home, she's clicked the silver shoes. She takes 3 steps in the air, and that's 3 seconds, and she's home. She's running across. Forgive me, I just want to make sure I don't screw up Frank Baum. The silver shoes took but 3 steps, and then she stopped so suddenly that she rolled over upon the grass several times before she knew where she was. And she sits up, and she's on the plains of Kansas, and she's looking across them, and there's the new farmhouse that Uncle Henry has built because the cyclone took away the old one. And Aunt Em is coming out to water the cabbages, it's as prosaic as that. And they have their reunion, she and Aunt Em. And but again, Baum wasn't planning on a series. When Disney made the Return to Oz movie in 1985, they had to treat Oz as a dream to a certain extent and buy the rights to the ruby slippers to use them from MGM. But then again, Oz turns out to be real, as real as it can be. So it's I don't know. I've always said if heaven doesn't look like the Emerald City across the poppy field, I'm not going. You know that. But no, I think the movie sometimes takes a bad rap as far as the clothing scene is concerned. We say, oh, you can't go home. There's no place like home. You can't just stay home. You know, that's stupid. And it's like, no, but it's not stupid. It's Dorothy goes to a home that was important to her at that time. That's the implication. It's not that she's never going to leave home again. It's just that, you know, then as you get older, you go on to establish homes other places with other people who will be close in different ways if you're fortunate. And so there's that I've sometimes had to defend the movie from. The other thing I've had to fight against countless times is any number of people of any age who have told me for decades that when they saw The Wizard of Oz on TV, the cameras, Dorothy says there's no place like home, but the camera pans down her body on the bed and her feet are sticking out under the coverlet and she's wearing the ruby slippers. That is the original ending of The Wizard of Oz, and now they don't show it anymore. And why don't they show it? So
I've read that loads of times online. I've no idea where that came from.
I think the movie really, really, really spurs and stimulates the imagination to
Yeah.
and that you see things that aren't there, like a hanging munchkin.
So the film closes then with Dorothy holding on to Toto saying,
Oh, but anyway, Toto, we're home. Home. And this is my room. And you're all here. And I'm not going to leave here ever, ever again. Because I love you all. And, oh, Auntie Em, there's no place like home.
Is whether it was a dream or not, what you think about it being a dream or not, could there be a better ending than that?
No.
No.
Arthur Freed was the one who really stressed that there's no place like home idea for the script. And I think that's why it ended up in there. And Noel Langley poo-pooed that. He said, no, it didn't need that. And that all that sentimental stuff. And it's like, no, it's important. And it was important in terms of our nation. And it became important in terms of the world. When all of a sudden homes were being blown up out from underneath people or taken away from people, or people were being taken away from their homes. That had been going on already.
It still resonates today.
I was just thinking that, given everything that's going on in Ukraine, it's very yeah.
Any final thoughts on the film itself? Nothing to do with the legacy, the myths, anything, just the film itself. Any final thought?
One thing I like the credits, as I recall them, they never say that Ray Bolger is the Scarecrow or Jack Hilly is the Tin Man. They just give their farmhand.
Yeah.
Came from Miss Gulch and Professor Marvel, which is interesting. And then, not a major interest, but a little. And then people always say, "Who's Nico? Who's Nico?" You know, because there is Nico, played by Pat Walsh. And again, when those Witch's Tower scenes with the golden cat and everything were trimmed, that's when you heard the Wicked Witch call her monkey familiar Nico, or Nico, however it was pronounced. And Pat Walsh, who did that role, was a veteran vaudevillian, and among his vaudeville act turns was animal impersonation. He was very diminutive, and that was something he did. He was known for. So that's why he gets billing.
So a little bit about promotion and press and magazines. Now, there was a hell of a lot of promotion for the Wizards of Oz.
Well, it was an incredible marketing campaign, I suppose, at the time, really, you know, because, I mean, it's the era before social media. There wasn't even such thing as a computer. There wasn't even television. So it's radio and print, you know, and it was heavily, heavily done. And there was even, you know, there was the ideal Dorothy dolls. I mean, it was full on. You could buy the Dorothy dress in, was it Sears or some store or something carried the Dorothy dress. I mean, it was full on marketing, to be fair to MGM.
Well, it was the first time MGM created a marketing campaign or a marketing department. And then it carried on from there through countless other pictures. But they licensed, I think there were about 15 or 20 companies they licensed to do. There was a Dorothy doll and a Scarecrow doll. They were from Ideal. There were supposed to be rubber figures, and they were made, but not many of them survived. They went into the rubber drives during World War II. There were Valentines, there was stationery, there was a Judy Garland line of clothes for girls and hats, and there was the Decca album. There were huge department store windows to promote Oz, right into Christmas of 1939. Again, I'm off. There was a game board and a dart board and storybooks and all of this kind of stuff that was licensed from either MGM or from the Baum estate or both, because Mrs. Baum got a cut of anything that MGM licensed having to do with the Oz characters. And so the trouble was, of course, it wasn't like now where a movie goes into a theater and sits there for 4 months because it's a big hit and is playing in hundreds of theaters for weeks at a time. There was much to do made about the fact that The Wizard of Oz was being held over in theaters because it was doing such great business. But then eventually they had to bump it after the second week or the third week because all the studios were turning out so much product in 1939 that there was this backlog of other movies that were waiting to get into the theaters. The press campaign, the newspaper ads, the magazine ads, the full color ads, the 2-color ads, the partially colored ads, just an enormous amount of scope to all of this. Ads with photographs, ads with drawings, ads with color cartoon comics. This was all part of it. And one of the reasons Wizard of Oz's budget overall hit $3.7 million is the promotion. Because the film I think the final tally of the film was 2.7. But when they added the cost of prints and advertising, it jumped another $1 million, which was extraordinary. But MGM knew they had to sell this and sell this hard, and that they had a product that they really believed in. So all of that coalesced into the kind of campaign that just, believe it or not, we're putting it briefly, but that's what it was like.
Okay, so I will hand you over to Connor for the rest of this, for the legacy, for the immediate reaction on the legacy. Poor Connor is currently in bed with COVID, bless him. I'm not in bed with COVID, I've just had to move into the bedroom halfway through. So Connor?
Yeah, I'm literally broadcasting from the sick bed here. But yeah, the press previews I have noted here for Oz, what's that, August, September took place?
August 9th.
September, yeah.
August 9th.
August 9th.
9. They screened it for the press, the working press. The sneak previews had been held in June, and that's how they cut Wizard of Oz from 2 hours down to 100 minutes by eliminating the jitterbug, the Over the Rainbow reprise, parts of the Wicked Witches lines, Ray Bolger's extended If I Only Had a Brain dance, the Return to the Emerald City and the reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. All kinds of little bits and pieces went, and those musical numbers, the end of If I Were King of the Forest. So when it was finally ready to be shown to the press, basically a week before the premiere, the official premiere, it was screened at MGM and it was screened here in New York. And there were something like probably 100 different newspaper and magazine people there so that the word could get out, so that when the film did premiere, the reviews would be ready to appear. We all know the legend that is put forward by the book, The Making of the Wizard of Oz, that the critics didn't like the movie, which is preposterous because the critics raved about the movie. In fact, there was, when we did the 50th anniversary book, and I found through various sources, including a scrapbook kept by Mrs. L. Frank Baum of reviews, especially from the Los Angeles and Nash papers, and because she lived in Hollywood. There were reviews of the press preview, and then most of the same critics reviewed the film again a week later when it premiered at Grauman's Chinese, and they could not say enough great things about it. And Al Jean later poo-pooed this shit. Oh, MGM bought all those reviews, and it's like, no, you cannot buy reviews of that caliber. I'm sorry, I know the Hollywood machine was vast and far-reaching, but this was not the case. In fact, there's a wonderful article about the press preview in the Hollywood Citizen News where the writer talks about the movie, but he also says, you don't get critics comparing notes on a film at these screenings. But when The Wizard of Oz was over, everybody wanted to talk about it to each other and how they still had the tears in their eyes and how this was a great historical cinematic achievement. And that was the basic tone of it, that whatever minor quibbles they might have had with some aspect of it, it was like, no, this is sensational. The transition from black and white to color, the use of the vaudevillians, the use of, the fact that the Lollipop Guild has this unbilled 30-second show-stopping moment as the Three Little Tough Kids. All of those touches, all of that. And when the film opened in LA on August 15th at Grauman's, the big premiere, and opened on Broadway 2 days later at the Capitol, with Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney doing a live show 5 times a day between screenings of Oz. The crowds were immense. The reviews were great. There were 3 or 4 naysayers. I think it was the New Yorker, the New Republic, and McCall's Magazine, who really didn't like Oz. These are the 3 reviews that Al Jean makes a point of harping on in her book, as if to imply that this was the attitude toward The Wizard of Oz when it opened. And it got to the point that Margaret Hamilton and Jack Haley and Ray Bolger all then talked for the rest of their lives about the fact that The Wizard of Oz got some pleasant reviews, but they weren't money reviews. They weren't very good reviews. The critics didn't like it. Mickey Rooney went to his grave talking about how he had to console Judy backstage at the Capitol because she was always in tears because the reviews for The Wizard of Oz were so bad. I mean, bull. The other thing Al Jean harps on is the fact that the film didn't make money when it came out. Well, no, it didn't. If the total budget with films with prints and advertising was 3.7 million, Wizard of Oz only made 3.2 million. However, that still put it on the list of one of the top 10 grossing films of the year. And two of the very good reasons, and among the very good reasons Oz didn't make money is the fact that a third of the audience, a half of the audience were young people who were getting in for 10 cents or 15 cents, as opposed to the adults who paid 25, 35, 50 cents to see the film. Now, the seats were all filled, but they weren't bringing in as much money if everybody there had been paying top price. And then you go one step further. I said earlier how the film could only be held over in certain theaters just so long because there was so much incoming product that had to be booked into the theaters. And then the very potent fact that MGM, the international department of MGM, was very much looking forward to having a Technicolor musical to show abroad, to show in Europe, to show in South America, south of the border, Australia, all these places. And of course, 2 weeks after The Wizard of Oz opened on Broadway with Judy and Mickey, Germany invaded Poland. And boom, there went most of the European market. It certainly would have broken even. Whether it would have made money initially, I don't know. Because again, fantasy was a hard sell to a certain audience. But certainly it was vastly enjoyed, and hundreds of thousands, millions of people went to the theater and laid down their money and saw it. And they broke attendance records everywhere. The reviews were great. Top 10 grossing films of the year. Also, a poll of 450 critics, 450 film critics. Oz was in the top 10 of their votes for the year. So there was nothing unsuccessful about The Wizard of Oz, except perhaps the timing and the pricing in terms of the age range of the audience and the fact that the European market was cut off. Again, it's perspective. Would I go to my grave saying, oh no, it's Wizard of Oz was a huge success. It was a huge success. It was a huge success, but you've got to explain on what levels and why it didn't break even.
Certainly the television viewings, which started in the US in 1956, John, did contribute to the long-term legacy of the movie.
Oh, no question. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that leads us nicely into the actual legacy of The Wizard of Oz. And we could probably be here for another day talking about just the legacy of The Wizard of Oz. But a couple of things just to touch on, I suppose, are the initial re-releases pre-television days in 1949 and 1955.
After, MGM paid, I think, $250,000 for the first telecast, and then it went down 225,000, 175,000, whatever it was. And when MGM's 10-year contract ran out on The Wizard of Oz, NBC, the rival network, came in with this huge $1 million offer to pick up the contract for television showings, one a year. And CBS couldn't see paying that money. They were ready to, increase their offer because it was such a ratings getter. It was always in the top 10 of any week when it wasn't the top 1 or 2 or 3. And but NBC then got the film because they were willing to pay, I don't know, it was something like $600,000, $800,000 a showing. And then when NBC's contract was up, CBS went right back and said, that's our movie, we'll pay you anything you want. And it got up to the point where it's $1 million per showing every time it was shown. And that film was shown on network television here 38 times. It's 30. I'm pretty sure it's right around that number. So you figure, $18-20 million there, plus, the lesser money that added up to several more $1 million in the 50s and 60s. One of the executives, I think it was somebody at CBS, just said that film is better than a gushing oil well because we can charge sponsors anything we want to buy commercial time for The Wizard of Oz, and they will pay.
Wow. I want to link the legacy of Oz into Judy in the sense of she, at least in her lifetime, did get a taste or a big taste of the legacy that movie had for her. She revisited the character of Dorothy at Christmas 1950 for a radio adaptation of The Wizard of Oz.
Do you suppose there is such a place, Toto, where there isn't any trouble? There must be. Not a place you can get to by a boat or a train, but it's far, far away, behind the moon, beyond the rain. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby.
And I actually meant to bring Steve Saunders' Rainbow's End with me, but there's a story in that when CBS suggested she finish off each episode of her TV show, forgive me if I get this wrong, with Over the Rainbow, and she turned around and said, no, there'll be no jokes about Dorothy, or maybe it was a spoof. Someone suggested a spoof of Over the Rainbow or something, but she said...
It was the ever-enchanting Mel Torme who said that she should do a parody of Over the Rainbow.
And she said there'll be no jokes about Dorothy.
Yeah, take it, Connor, please.
There we go. No, it's just that it shows that that was 1963. So it showed that even in her lifetime, she was aware of her connection to that movie and what it meant to so many people. So that's me. I will put it out to everybody.
Well, the exact quote was, she said, I don't want anybody anywhere ever to lose the thing they have about Dorothy in that song. It's kind of sacred.
That's it.
And I know I used to send away to the newspapers in the mid to late 60s around the country when she was doing concerts. And I would get the newspaper ads, I would get the newspaper accounts of the press conferences and the reviews. And there's one, she went to North Carolina to do a fundraiser for the Democratic Party. And a plane was chartered to bring her in from the nearest big city. And she got off the plane and she was met by this sea of little girls in green outfits, they were in their Girl Scout uniforms, and they were all there. And she got off the plane and she knew, she said, it's because of that movie. It's because of Dorothy. And the press conference said she wandered into this sea of Girl Scouts and said, I don't look the way You thought I'd look, do I? I'm a little older, maybe. And but the reporter said the Girl Scouts didn't care. This was Dorothy. This was absolutely unconditionally Dorothy. And I did a whole article for the Oz Club magazine back in 1986, collecting all the Judy Dorothy anecdotes I could find. After the Judy played the Palace the third time and came back in '67 against all odds, and she took the show on tour. She was playing Hartford, Connecticut for a Friday and Saturday night, and there's an audio tape of both nights. One of them, it sounds like that, you know, but it's clear enough so that you can make out, especially after you've listened to it for a while. And about 3/4 of the way through the concert, I think Judy's just done That's Entertainment. And she kind of sits down on the staircase. This was when she was making her entrance to the audience and climbing up onto the stage every night. She sat down. She was going to, if she was slotted to do I Loved Him, but He Didn't Love Me, the Cole Porter Quiet song, before going into the Rockabye and the Encores. And people are already calling out, Rainbow, you know, Swati. So, and at one point, there's this lull for a moment. Judy maybe, you know, sipping a glass of water or something, but you hear this woman on the tape yell out, "Hey, Judy, this little girl wants to ask you something." And Judy says, "Well, what does she want to ask?" And you hear this tiny young little voice say, "Nothing." And Judy says, "No, darling, what is it?" And the little tiny voice says something you can't make out. And the Judy couldn't make out either because it was so quiet. And Judy said, what's more, darling? And the little girl says, Yellow Brick Road, because she's heard people calling out the titles of songs that she wants to hear, that people wanted to hear. That's the one she wants to hear Judy Garland sing. And without missing a beat, Judy says, "Oh," and you can hear by the sound of her voice that she's standing up. And she goes, "Oh, follow the yellow brick road, follow the yellow brick road, follow, 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 follow the yellow brick road, follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow." She kind of has fun with it at the end. Now, again, this is all a cappella, and and the audience is kind of gently laughing, but very quietly so that they could hear her. And she finishes the follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick road. And then she says in the most gentle, dulcet, confiding tones possible. And you can just see her standing on the edge of the stage, leaning out in the direction of the little girl's voice. She says, "Yes, I was Dorothy." Sorry. And there is a beat of silence, and the whole audience just kind of goes, "Oh," and goes into this ovation that is just amazing. Forgive me for getting emotional, but it's just
let me off here as well now.
one of those moments, you know. And she took it all very seriously and believed in it very. And there, you know, yes, there are press quotes about her cracking wise about Over the Rainbow or The Wizard of Oz or something like that, but not intrinsically, not inherently, not interior. Sorry, I'm prolonging this myself now, but I think that is such a telling anecdote about Judy Garland and The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland and her audiences, Judy Garland and her appeal to kids at 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, because those concerts in 65 and 67 that I attended, there were so many people my age, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. They grew up with the MGM movies on TV, but they grew up with The Wizard of Oz every year, but they grew up with the TV series and the specials and the Hollywood Palace and Sammy Davis and Perry Como. And they were there to see Judy Garland because they knew they had to be there when she made it happen. And Dorothy is the foundation of all that. But one of the things I point out in that article that I wrote about all the Judy's comments about being Dorothy is that she wasn't interviewed at length about The Wizard of Oz, because that at any point in her career from 1939 on, there was always so much else going on that's what they asked her about: the concerts, the tour, the records, the latest movies, the what are your plans from here, talk about Judgment at Nuremberg, talk about Star is Born, talk about Carnegie Hall, talk about the TV show. Again, Oz was always part of the pattern, but it was far and away the theme, as it became for all the other characters from The Wizard of Oz in the later years of their career. That's what people wanted to talk to Ray and Maggie and Jack and everybody about. and Bert. But anyway.
Just going back to Judy with Over the Rainbow, and how protective she was over it, it brings me back to the Barbara Walters interview, where she says, "I've heard you don't sing Over the Rainbow again." And Judy is like straight away, "Who says that?" So some reporter, and Judy straight away with a humour, "Well, what does his wife do, sing?"
Well, that grew out of a very, Judy made kind of a public declaration in 1962 that she wasn't going to sing Over the Rainbow anymore. She was very matter of fact about it. The exact quote was, and I can hear her saying that, "I figure I've wrung that one pretty dry," meaning I don't know that I can get any more emotion out of that. And this was at the point of the Carnegie Hall and the Sahara, and she just made Gay Paris, Child is Waiting, and I Could Go On Singing, and she had the highest rated program in CBS history, and she'd won the 5 Grammys, and she got the gold record. And I think she was looking to kind of get into new material and distance herself a little. And she had just recorded Little Drops of Rain by Arlen and Harburg, and she thought that that was a wistful kind of song that she could sing and maybe make it a second theme. And of course, it didn't have that kind of power, nor did Gay Paris, unfortunately. And she was back to singing Over the Rainbow. The only time she didn't sing it was in the concerts at the end of '62 in Las Vegas and the Sahara, and then in early '63 in Tahoe. But when she went back to the stage in Australia after the TV series, Over the Rainbow was definitely part of the act again. And maybe after that, after 2 years away from it, she felt, "Oh, no, I have to do this. It's what people want, and I want to give people what they want."
I nearly think that's almost a perfect summation of everything, because we could sit and talk about the re-releases of Oz. We could sit and talk about it being on, as John said, 4K, 10K, 12K. We could sit and talk about everything to do with it. But I think what we've just said is nearly the perfect finish. I mean, we know Oz is ingrained in pop culture. We know it's everywhere. Like, you can't watch a thing on television without hearing some reference to "We're Not in Kansas Anymore," or "There's No Place Like Home," or "Lions and Tigers and Bears, Oh My." It's just ingrained, I think, in everything.
I just want to say, obviously, thank you to Judy and the movie. The movie brought me to Judy. Judy brought me to all yous. It's given me, some of the high points in my life. I met John Fricke through Judy. I've met Connor in person through Judy. Hopefully I'll meet you two through Judy. It's a journey, isn't it? And then you have the whole, like Judy's life's the ups. We have so much joy from it, but then the downs when you have to battle off all these myths and the falsities and everything. And regarding the legacy, I mean, as Connor says, we could go on for ages going on about, where it's placed in top 100 musicals, films, Over the Rainbow, Song of the Century, AFI's #1 song, Wicked Witch, top villain in something, the Ruby Slippers selling for like a record-breaking amount at one point. I mean, where would we end? We'd never end the podcast, would we?
No.
So, I've never known a part of my life without it. This has already got a bit too emotional, so I just want to say thank you to everyone involved in the film, Judy especially, and to you four as well. Thank you.
Yes, I echo Sarah's sentiments, and Oz is the first movie I ever recall seeing, and whenever my time comes, I want it to be the last the last thing I remember. And yeah, it's just, especially here in the United States, it's as American as apple pie, as they'd say, and it has transcended language and culture and any border, like all over the world. And it's a comfort movie. It's just, yeah, it becomes part of your life. It becomes part of who you are. I think of references to it a lot, probably every day in one way or another. And yeah, it's been very special. And like Sarah said, it was kind of my gateway to all things Judy before I even knew it. So I I'm indebted to you all for having me on. And John, thank you again for sharing all of your wisdom. You're kind of the lifeline between us and the people who were actually there. And without you being the bridge, I don't think we'd have as much information and history to draw upon. So I thank you for your work as well.
You're welcome. As I say, it is a privilege to have done it. And it was never what I set out to do, but by the grace of God, I've been allowed to do it. And whatever I can do for her, if I live another 100 years, I could never do enough to repay her. And this is something I wanted to say earlier, that we were talking about how you get into the Wizard of Oz film because of her, and because of her performance, and because of her realism. She pulls the audience into that film from frame one. And I've said this before too. It may even be in part one, but there's this wonderful little girl, doesn't matter if you're a girl or a boy, but this is a child who is worried about her pet, and worried about something that happened off camera, and worried about being in trouble. It turns out trouble in school, trouble with the school teacher. She gets home, there's no time for her. The people she loves. The farmhands are kind but brusque. She's left to sing her I Want song all alone. And then all of a sudden everything goes haywire again with Miss Gulch. By the time that girl gets to Technicolor, you are so involved in her life as a child to child. There's no way you don't go on that ride where she goes, and you care desperately about her and love her in the end. You just love her because she's taken you on that ride with her. And that's what Judy does in every film, in every song, in every concert, every recording.
I think the great joy for me is seeing at this age now in my early 30s, because, my friends around me are becoming parents, and I see their kids now starting to discover The Wizard of Oz, or in the one particular case, Return to Oz, and I gave them the DVD of Journey Back to Oz to watch. That's the joy for me, that it continues on each time.
So I have a quote from Judy that I think just perfectly summarizes the podcast. I wanted to stay like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Life wasn't as complicated then. But I can't help myself growing up. No one can. Time won't stop and life won't stand still. But I have a feeling that if I just look backward once in a while at Dorothy, if I am offbeat in any way, I'll get back on the soundtrack again. Dorothy and I thought a lot alike when I made The Wizard of Oz, and I like to think that we still do.